What's going on? What's going on? It's your boy, Storyteller Jet, with another episode of the That's So Fire talk show. And today I have a pretty special guest in the house today. Brett Lane. Let's go, baby. We are going to be talking about digital marketing and AI. This guy is a slew of knowledge. I don't know if that's even English words, but like so knowledgeable about digital marketing, SEO, and as of recent, with the rise of AI, has become like one of the top experts in AI. So if you want to grow your business with AI, this is the conversation to be a part of today. So it's going to be super exciting. And for the people that are just tuning in, Happy New Year. This is the second episode of the new year. And I want to wish every single one of you massive success, health, joy, all the great things that you may be wishing for this year. I hope that you are going to accomplish them tenfold. So without further ado, would like to introduce my guest for today, Dr. Brett Lane.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Absolutely, man. Let's do a quick introduction. Who is Brett Lane?
So Dr. Brett Lane is a digital marketing expert with 2 decades of experience with a heavy focus on artificial intelligence. I've been looking into that space long before the AI buzz started out with content creation. I've been looking at it for like the last almost 10 years.
Wow. Almost 10 years.
Yep.
Like, obviously AI has been around for even probably longer, but like I did not even like thought that we were going to be where we are at today with AI, and you were like already doing things with AI that since then. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting because when the technology just was in its infancy, there were small types of changes that you could make where you could see some type of AI where the technology was just barely starting to crawl. So it's interesting to see where the tech has gone even in the last 12 months. It's insane.
Yeah. So before we dive into your origin story and all that fun stuff, what are some of the topics that people that are tuning in today might expect that we're going to be chatting about? Obviously, I have a slew of questions, but I know there might be some other things that you are going to be talking about that I may not even think about, because obviously you have a doctorate in all of this kind of stuff too, like digital marketing and all of that. What are some of the things that you are going to be, that they should tune in and, keep watching?
I think a huge piece is going to be looking at how you use AI in your business, not being afraid of using it, not getting to a point where you feel like you're being inundated with tools, and being able to figure out what are the best tools that you can use with AI. And then how do you use those tools? I think that I could talk for hours about just those things. And if anything comes off, the cuff, and people have questions or we want to dig a little bit deeper, then I'm more than willing to do so.
Awesome. Just so you guys know, whoever's tuning in for the show, this guy is a wealth of knowledge. And also he's such a great giver. I remember, we were just chatting about that earlier today. I remember your presentations at Board of Advisors. This is where we originally met through the Board of Advisors. Shout out to Mike Calhoun. Love you, bro. That's where we originally met. And every single presentation that he did, everybody, you could hear a pen drop in the room. Like everybody just like sitting, taking notes. Like one of the last presentation that you had were, I think it was like 40 different tools that you can use in your business today. And that was like so incredible. So maybe we'll chat about some of your favorite tools today as well, but super excited to, chat with you today. So very first question that I have for you, what is your origin story? Tell me a little bit about where you started from, like the journey that got you here today.
It's a good question. So story started out in 2003. I was working in car rental, and I was in a management trainee program, and I just noticed that I wanted to get more education. And when I was getting that education, my managers were saying, "Why are you going to school?" And I told them, "I want to learn more about digital marketing." And they kind of thought I was crazy, didn't know where I was going to take that with, car rental. And I was really good at sales. So I thought, man, I could use my experience in sales, look at digital marketing. Started consulting with a variety of businesses when I moved to Missouri. I just wound up getting in contact with the company. I sold them literally one phone call the idea that they needed to have a digital marketing consultant at their smaller agency. After that first phone call, I got the job, wound up moving to Missouri within like 30 days.
Wow.
So I started working with doing a lot of smaller consulting type gigs where I was learning about how to do SEO and other forms of digital marketing that was for small and medium-sized businesses. Did that for about 10 months. And then the company said, hey, we cannot afford you. They were paying me a whopping salary of $22,000,
Wow.
of which I got about $10,000. And so I thought to myself, okay, I really need to look into some type of a larger agency. And then I started looking out for agencies in the Midwest and found one that was in Ohio. And I thought, I'm going to get in contact with the owner. It's a small company. That agency was growing. I was their fourth employee. And I wound up being thrust into working with massive brands. Like one of the first brands I got to work with was Marriott.
Really?
The owner of the agency said, hey, we've got 10 new Marriott locations. You get to work on these. And I had the most experience from an SEO standpoint at that agency at the time. That 10 different locations grew to me managing over 100. And I was able to learn a lot about the travel industry. I wound up getting picked up by one of their competitor agencies, who then introduced me to brands like Four Seasons Hotels. I actually had the opportunity of helping to create the brand strategy for Four Seasons Hotels as a whole for social
That is
media.
awesome. That is incredible. Those are some big names that you're dropping over here, like Hilton, Four Seasons, and all the other like cool stuff. That's cool, man.
Yeah, what I liked about it was I was thrust into a situation where you're going to sink or swim. And I was able to use my experience to take that agency's brand to even higher level. But what I really liked was just the challenges that came with the technology. So I was talking earlier to you about like social media marketing before it was a buzzword. I was literally working with the chief marketing officer of Four Seasons, teaching him about RSS feeds and how we should use Twitter. And it took literally 6 months to get the brand to focus heavy on just Twitter alone.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and that what I enjoyed about that too was creating a strategy for the brand as a whole, and then looking at, well, how do you create 82 micro strategies off of the brand? So the journey, just my agency days, it was really cool being able to navigate through those types of things. And the main reason why I shifted to going and doing a lot more stuff on my own and creating our own agency was because I was selling a lot of deals and I was just not really getting the commissions that I should have been getting. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know what? I'm making agencies millions. I was selling millions upon millions of dollars in services within the first 7 years of working with a couple different agencies. So I realized it makes more sense to bring it in and do it on my own. And at that point in time, I was living in Texas. My wife was a bank teller. And she kept going to work and she was like, man, I got robbed today. And I was like, you got what? She said some guy came in and he had his hands down his pants and he started counting backwards to me what it sounded like in Spanish. And she's freaking out. She just like throws the money at the guy because she didn't know anything else. She was like, I'm not going to get shot over somebody trying to rob me. So basically she would go to work and she would be just stomach in knots. So her and I had a conversation about creating an agency together because I didn't want her to have to go to work and have, massive stomach issues for a number of days in a row.
Yeah, and that's true PTSD right there. Like, getting somebody that walked into the bank, like, I mean, every single time that she may have gone to work, it's like her life, she's probably going to be on edge trying to be, whoa, is something crazy going to happen today? Yeah, I mean, I would not wish that on anyone to kind of have to go through an experience like that.
Yeah, she was very happy that we were able to do something different. And the crazy part about that was in 2008. So we created an agency, got the agency to where we were doing $20,000 a month in revenue. Then literally within 6 months, we had the housing crash that took place in 2008, and I lost 50% of our business.
Wow,
overnight.
That is crazy. Yeah, I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. But before we go to this Next questions. Shout out to my man Jeremy Nuff, who is watching. He says, "Oh man, not this guy, but you are awesome." Jeremy's the best. Yeah. So before we go into that journey with SEO outsourcing, can you share a little bit about like I know you just alluded to it, like what was the process like to like starting to work for yourself and creating SEO outsourcing?
It was an interesting process in that like you have to take risk to get anything started, and a lot of people when they look at entrepreneurism, they kind of are hesitant. They either think it's going to be this crazy journey that where they're going to get everything that they want short period of time, and they don't think about all the time that it takes to just get there. And I know there's a lot of focus on grind and hustle, but unfortunately and fortunately for me, I just had to keep working and working and working and working in terms of looking at the different types of clients. You know, if it's pre-agency days, it's small businesses. Agency days, it's a variety of everything, working on multi-million-dollar campaigns. Then when you shift back to owning a business, now you have to rely upon your own expertise from what you did in the past. That's why a lot of times I'll tell people, like, I've worked on multi-million-dollar campaigns for lots of different brands just so that they can see I'm not brand new to this world. So a lot of it just getting started is being willing to take the risk to be able to go out on your own, knowing that whatever you create, you know, you have to go out and teach yourself how to fish.
Yeah. I guess like continuing to those thoughts, what advice would you give to anybody out there that wants to jump and work for themselves, like starting a business, that are afraid of taking risk?
I think the key thing is not being worried about risk and being able to like literally. I've heard people say when you start a business, it's like jumping off of a cliff without a parachute. You know, I like to look at it as like having one of those mini parachutes that goes on after the big one. So it kind of slows you down, and you're going to hit some rocks as you're going down. But like you have to be willing to take that risk and know that there's a tremendous amount of reward that comes with owning businesses. But if you're not willing to risk it and to know that there's a lot of people like ourselves who will have conversations on the weekly about the struggles that you go through with, you know, owning a business or running a business, and being able to have the resiliency to keep on doing what needs to be done. I think that's the hardest thing, is getting over the fear of the risks and the not knowing what's going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. The entrepreneur journey is tough. One of my favorite pictures that I see on Google all the time is the ups and down, and like, oh man, I got this. Oh no, everything sucks today. Oh no, I got this. Oh yes, let's go. What are some of the like hard moments that you have had through your entrepreneur journey, and how did you get out of those?
Well, I mentioned earlier resiliency. I mean, that's the biggest key, I think, for my own success. I mentioned a couple times earlier on where starting a business, I went out and put all my faith into a business in '08, lost half of my customers due to something that was completely out of my hands, like the housing market. Then when COVID hit, same exact type of thing happened. I think we wound up seeing about 50 to 60% of all budgets with clients were frozen.
Wow.
And I was able to get my clients to pause part of their marketing and not all of it, because I told them, like, Google still is going to do its thing. People are still going to search. Just because you're at home doesn't mean people aren't searching on the internet. So I've seen times where we've seen revenue go way up and way down, and you're weathering the storm. And I think going through where you're thinking, okay, I'm basically paying for somebody to live. You got people underneath you. You know, we talked about different masterminds and groups. I have a lot of friends who are, you know, running these multi-million-dollar businesses. Unfortunately, when they were going through COVID, they had to furlough a lot of their people. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that not a single one of my team members went on a break. I actually did not pay myself for 10 months because I made a move from San Diego. I sold a house and went from San Diego to Phoenix, and I did not take a pay for 10 months so that my team could keep doing what they're doing. And some of the people got more money because I felt like they needed a raise because they were continuing to help push us even further. So I've seen the highs and I've seen the lows in terms of, you know, revenue making it. And I think the key thing there is just being able to just, like you said, keep pushing, knowing that the economy is going to bounce back. You know, everything, if you stop and you get down, you get hit and you stay on the ground and you just lay there, to me, I'm like, you have to get up. You know? So for me, that biggest thing was just going through some of those financial struggles and being able to just keep pushing yourself, even when you felt like, like you felt like the world was on your shoulders
Yeah.
and is crushing you.
Yeah. So you've had to deal with that twice. What is the biggest advice that you would give to anybody? Like there may be a seasoned entrepreneur, but that may be hitting hard times.
I think a key thing really is looking at trimming any of the fat. I do this every single year at the beginning of the year. I look at what tools am I using? Is there anything that we're not fully utilizing, and can I start cutting those tools? Just this last week, I think I shaved almost $2,000 of excess waste from just tools that I'm not really using to the fullest extent. That and looking at like team members. A big thing is are you working with A players? We all want to have A players, and in some cases it makes sense to have a B player if you have them fitting in like a very specific job and they're valuable to you, that's great. But I also look at the human capital that's pushing your business. If you have a moment where you notice a team member is not really pulling their weight and you've just merely been putting up with their output, then it's time to look at, okay, do I need to find somebody else? Do I need to look at like virtual assistants? Like there's so many options for finding out new people, but I think the key thing there is just being able to make sure that you're reevaluating where you are and you start trimming back, because what I've noticed is by taking off a little bit of that extra weight, you kind of have more room to breathe, because you're thinking, okay, I've froze $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 of excess spend on a monthly basis, and once I've done that, usually it makes my stress levels go way down.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started SEO outsourcing. What are some of the services that you provided to your clients?
So we do a lot of work with content creation, and I look at digital marketing assets as a whole. Whether it's content creation that's text-based, if it's with podcasts, with audio, whether it's video-based content, whether it is helping a person's website rank higher by being able to show Google specifically like, hey, this is what the business represents. And then I think the aspect that's growing the most is helping businesses get into the LLMs of these business or these algorithms like Claude, Gemini, Perplexity. That's really where the industry is heading, in my opinion, because it's the only way you get mentioned in those large AI models is if you're viewed as a high-level citation source. So you got to get more exposure. So you got to do a lot of the things you're doing back in the days to get larger newspaper publications or blogs to mention your brand, or even getting a lot more exposure on Reddit. If I had to drop any bit of a nugget for your users, what I would tell them is go to Reddit and figure out ways that you can engage with people on Reddit in a positive fashion where you're not just pitching your services. Being able to seed. So right now, our team has the capacity to be able to go out and seed messages on Reddit accounts that are aged, that have karma. And now we're starting to see, there's a lot more references to these businesses that are taking place all across these other AI models.
This is very interesting, and I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that, because most people, when they think about social media, they think about marketing their businesses. They think about the big three, the big four, which is like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Mm-hmm. But there are other tools like that, like Reddit, that probably 95% of the people out there do not go and promote their business or kind of connect with other people over there. Can you share some, why would some people consider using Reddit as one of their marketing tools?
I think a lot of times people assume that Reddit is where most people go to complain, or they take some kind of action against. So if you ever want to find what's bad about anything on the internet, review, scam, Reddit is a great place because you're going to get people who are going to tell you all kinds of information. So I think some business owners and people tend to shy away from that type of a site because some people go on to that site and they do too much promotional. So one good strategy within Reddit is start getting inferences of your brand where you're not linking out to the brand. So if you have somebody talking in your business that's like a franchise business for kids, and there's people asking about franchising opportunities, well, you're going to be able to go in and interact with people where you're mentioning the brand, but you're not necessarily linking to it. And in some cases, you have to do that slowly over time. And then when you do link to particular types of brands within that platform, what I'm noticing is if you can get beyond the first 2 weeks, typically your links are going to stick. But there's that review process where they've got people going in and making sure that you're linking to the right place, it's adding value. So what you want to do if you work with anybody who's helping you get mentions, you want them to have some type of a guarantee that, hey, they're going to be reviewing this for 1, 2, or 3 months. Because if you can get something to stick on Reddit for 3 months, it's not going to be going anywhere.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a great strategy that most entrepreneurs probably are not thinking about, for sure. So you have long experience as it relates to digital marketing. How have you seen SEO evolve over the years?
It's interesting because there's a lot of things that have remained the same. I tell people talk about AI and they think it's brand new. So I got some people who are selling the services and it's brand new. And I want to tell them it's not. Like, it's just a new way of analyzing data at a much quicker rate. So Google has came out and said, here's hundreds of things that you can do to get exposure within Google. A lot of it has to do with the way that your website communicates with Google, how technically sound it is, how much content is on your website. Does the content reflect what users are searching for? And then who's linking to you? Do you have the ability to get people to link to your site as a resource? Those are some things that have never changed. Some people say that link building is dead, and I tell them, Google's whole algorithm was based off of link building over 20 years ago. So it hasn't gone anywhere. So there are a lot of components that have stayed exactly the same. In my opinion, what's happening differently now with AI is we have the ability to look at data from all over the internet in a much quicker time frame. So if you look at Google's AI overviews, it's always pulled data from a variety of sources, images, videos. I think it's doing it much quicker and it's doing it much better because it's scrubbing data and it's looking at conducting multi-search queries. So you might do a search for something related to like buying a house or renting an apartment in Dallas. And the AI is looking at what are called keyword clusters, and it's different keywords related to anything that you could be searching for. So rather than doing a search like it used to for something specifically to just an apartment in Dallas, it's now looking at all the components related to what you would be looking at as a user, what's important to you, and it's layering in that data, and it pulls it back in that AI overview standpoint. So now you might have one search query that has like 10 different links at the very top of a small box within Google search results.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you are the SEO master. What is the biggest secret that you have that most people might not know about SEO in general?
I think the not really a secret, but I think it's just having access to doing things at scale. So like when people have said, Google will tell you specifically, you don't need to build links to your website. And I would say it's like having a business that's in the Sahara Desert. Because if you take that same business and you give it links and you put it in New York and you got people walking by you every single day, you're selling a lot more hot dogs. You might sell some hot dogs to camels in the desert, but that's about it. So they tell you that you should be doing X, when in fact you should be doing Y, which is creating really good content like they said, but also finding places to link to you and being able to do it at scale. And then being able to do it and rely on somebody who can do it at a very large scale, but doing it the right way. So like, you're not just going to go out and ask anyone under the sun to link to you, because why would they do that? Like, you have to be able to provide value to those users. So I think doing it at scale is huge. I think another major component is the way that you create content. So, I had a conversation with my team just 2 days ago, and we write content with AI where we were able to look at creating outlines and the initial content, and then I have a whole separate team that then adds layers of content to that content. And I got another team that reviews the content to make sure that it's friendly to searchers and AI. So with that process, anyone can create content at scale. So at the beginning of last year, AI models started taking off. People were writing a lot of content, but they were writing crap content. And what I've noticed is the models themselves are getting so much better at looking at why are people searching for information? What are they searching for? How do you structure it? Whereas right now, my team they came to me just 2 weeks ago and they were like, can we write a lot more content with AI And I've been pushing these guys like, hey, I want to use a lot more AI because I can look at competitors and I can create spectacular content with the AI and then with the human overlay on it. So they really surprised me when they were saying like, I'd like to create a lot more because they're finally seeing like the proofs in the pudding. When you look at that content on a website, it makes a lot more sense and it's friendly. So I think the key thing for users would be if you use content and you create it with AI, you want to make sure that you're creating the most value. And it makes sense to talk to the AI in a standpoint of, hey, you're an expert. I want you to review my top 5 competitors. I want you to look at what are they doing incorrectly? What are they doing incorrectly? Where are their gaps? I did this for a massage therapy location in my area, Wesley Chapel. And we literally looked at her biggest 5 competitors, and she didn't know about our pricing. It literally took me 3 minutes to find her top 10 competitors, to find how they charge for all their services, to be able to tell her, you're charging 10% less than what everybody else is doing for a 60-minute massage. She was like, well, I said, here's the proof. It took me 3 minutes with AI to figure out what they're doing. And then also, there's 7 pages of content we need to create related to different types of massages. Now, what's funny is we'd create content in the past and it would take months for Google to find it, to rank it. I literally created 7 pages of content for the customer, all using AI, and it took Google 3 days to find the content, and literally within less than 2 weeks, that client is ranking in a top 10 position for 7 keywords where I focus on 1 keyword per page.
Yeah, I guess let's expand on that a little bit. What are some of the strategies that you are using with content to help people rank on Google?
So what I look at is GEO for generative engine optimization, and I look at what are people searching for within AI, and then when you create content, we're looking at how do you make it GEO friendly. So when I go and create any piece of content, I like to use Claude and Perplexity. Those are my 2 favorite AIs, and I'll use them back to back. One of the things I will do is typically create content with one, and I will do a peer review from one AI to the next. I'll say, hey, Perplexity, what do you like about this article? How can it get better? And I have these conversations where I pit the AI against each other, and by the time I get done, I have a piece of content that's gone through 3 renditions between 2 different AI programs. So I'm asking it, if you're an expert in SEO or content creation, I want this article to be GEO friendly. I want it to be SEO friendly. I want it to target on a particular location, like in her case, Wesley Chapel, Florida. I want you to look at what the content gap analysis would look like for X number of keywords. And then I'll go back and have the AI say, oh, well, when we looked at your biggest competitor, they're talking a lot about the benefits to it, but they're not talking about like the prices. They're not talking about there's no social proof. So we're able to go back in and have the AI do a lot of the cross-referencing as they're creating the content. So when it comes back, it says, hey, you now have a piece of content that's 10 to 15% better than your competitor because we looked at these extra 10 things. So it does take a little bit more time, but you're almost having to act like a prompt engineer, and you're talking to the AI and saying, hey, you need to think this way. You need to look at the competitors in this fashion. You need to look at keywords in this fashion. So it's like a 5 or 6 step process. When you compare that to somebody who just creates a piece of content because we're sitting here in Clearwater, Florida, and you wanting to rank for things related to like studios, for video, for brand amplification, like your content has to be better than everybody else's because people can create content at scale. But people nowadays, I believe, are creating content at scale, but it doesn't have any value.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge mistake. I guess that follows my next question. What is the biggest mistake that people make when they are creating content using AI?
I think they're not having that conversation that we talked about. They're creating very general content that's not solving a problem, or they're not creating content that looks at things that would exist like within an FAQ on a website. Looking at every single question that I mentioned, a kids franchising business that we work with that's here in Florida and in Georgia. And we were able to create content for this brand where we looked at the business as a whole. We looked at all their operating procedures, all the benefits, and we cross-referenced all of that data with any question that a consumer would ever ask their brand. and we had that content reflect on an FAQ page, then that's layer one. Layer two is now how do you create other content that reflects the individual questions but at greater length. So the reason I do that is when you create FAQ content, you now have the opportunity to have that content show up at the very top of Google search results within either the AI overviews or within what they call zero search, which is the very top. You also have the ability to be found for longer tail keywords, like keywords that are made up of 2 or 3 search phrases, because now you have a complete article that reference a question that is then being found in either zero search or it's being found someplace within the first 10 listings of Google.
Yeah. Now let's go a little bit more basic, and I know that's a deeper question, but if you were to share like a prompt to anybody watching this when they were thinking about creating content that is enriched in SEO, what would that prompt be?
I would tell the AI that I want you to think like a certain type of person. I want you to think like an SEO expert who has X number of years experience. I want you to also look at it from a competitive standpoint. I want you to analyze my competitor for A, B, and C. We need to look at it particularly, maybe it's a geographical standpoint. If you're a business in Tampa and you're wanting to be found, I want you to look at businesses in my area. I want you to look at how people would search for the content. Help me come up with primary and secondary types of keywords that would reflect a business. You go through that first round and, hey, I want you to help me create a piece of content based on what the competitive content gap is with my competitors. Now it'll say, hey, you've got 6 in your market. There's some really big competitors have a lot of content, but they're not talking about different themes. You need to talk about these themes, and then it says, hey, here are 5 themes you need to create and you need to talk about. Then I'll ask that AI, can you ask me questions that would help me come up with more answers to help you create this content? So now you got the AI saying, oh, I got to, here's 5 questions. You answer those 5 questions. Are there any other questions that I should be asking you? Oh yeah, great question, Brett. You should ask me these other 4. I answer those 4. You go back and you have that dialogue. Before you know it, you have a really good piece of content. But at the very end, what I would do is I would do a peer review. I would say, oh, my go-to is typically Claude. But if I need to do anything with numbers, strategy is heavy as Claude, but anything with numbers or things with finances, I go to Perplexity. I'd ask Perplexity, can you review this content and tell me if anything is missing? And then you go back through that second round. So the prompting, it takes a while to go through that prompt. And I know there are people online who have prompts to how to create the best piece of content that's GEO friendly. I like to have a conversation with the AI.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get the best output when you have that conversation.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. What are some of the tools that you have used in the past that most people don't know about, but that provides tons of value as it relates to AI?
With AI, I mentioned Claude earlier. The pricing, you could pay $100 a month and have access to their highest level of their AI model, and you can write a lot more content. Perplexity is also very, very good. When you look at AI, you have to look really at like what's your objective. So if you were to say, hey, Brett, I'm looking at doing AI with video. Okay, great. I would say you need to look at something like HeyGen, which everybody knows that people are cloning themselves. HeyGen, in my opinion, does the best job of giving you a clone of yourself visually. HeyGen also works with a company called 11 Labs, which, in my opinion, is the best at cloning your voice. Mm-hmm. So now you got a tool that can clone your face and your voice together, and you can give it text-based prompts.
Yeah.
So in terms of video, those are some of my absolute favorite tools. Usually what I like to do is if I'm working with anybody, I like to figure out like what type of digital assets do you have? There are different tools related to podcasting. I do like Riverside if you're doing interviews like this and you want to have a video that can be stored on your computer as well as on the internet. Usually when you try to do Zoom meetings where you're talking to people, sometimes it gets a little glitchy. You might have issues with the video and or the audio. So I think tools like Riverside are very, very good. I think when it comes to tools, I tell people too, you don't have to be testing every single tool under the sun. you mentioned being in a mastermind with me where I came in and gave you 40 tools that were broken across 7 different categories. That was like drinking through a fire hose. And I wanted to give each person one nugget that they can deal with. So what I typically look at is, what is your mode of communication with people? Is it video? Is it audio? And then at that point, I'll say, you should use this, or this tool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What are some of the tools that you are using to? I'll take one step back. A lot of people, they struggle with coming up with content, titles or content ideas and stuff like that. What are some of the tools that you are using to help you come up with, content ideas that potentially could rank within, SEO?
So, and one old school tool is semrush.com. It's a very old SEO tool, but it has a lot of data. What I like about that tool is I think you pay another $100 a month to get access to their AI related data. So now you can see how many citations your business has. I think they do Claude, they do Gemini, they do ChatGPT. So I think they at least do those 3. So old school with SEO, that's been my go-to, is going in and being able to look at, you put in your website address in it, and it can tell you every single keyword that you ranked for under the sun, all the variations. I mentioned things like keyword clusters, where you can say, oh, I have a search that's being conducted for Atlanta apartments. And then those clusters could be Atlanta apartment leases, Atlanta apartment maintenance, all those variations. And then every single one of those clusters might have 5 to 10 different keyword phrases. So SEMrush has been a go-to tool to be able to just give me lots and lots and lots of data. What I'll typically do now is take all that data and I'll feed it to Claude. And I'll say, hey, I need you to give me, this used to take me hours. When I was at my first agency, I was working with another person, his name's Charles, and we would spend 2 to 3 hours each analyzing data, presenting these proposals to these banks, and presenting these audits. I now can literally run an audit within SEMrush, pull in 20 pages of data, take that data, give it to Claude, and say, hey, I'm going in and creating a project within Claude. I now have told that project, I want you to look at the data in this fashion, give me the top 10 points that would matter to a customer from an SEO standpoint or for a content amplification standpoint. The AI now will cross-reference that data. It takes like 6 seconds. And it comes back with a high-level overview of the top 10 things that business should be doing to rank better from an on-site technical standpoint.
Yeah. Incredible. I'm super excited to see where AI is going to lead us in the future with all the, time saving and all the opportunities that it's creating for all of us. A lot of people say that AI search is going to kill Google. What do you think about that?
I don't think it is. I think I was literally looking at Instagram this morning and I was laughing because somebody had did a post about AI and how everyone's thinking that these other models are taking so much of the landscape away. It represents like 10% or 15% of total search now. Now, my opinion is I think ChatGPT did a very, very good job of getting the data out and letting users test it. People didn't know, and they don't think about this, as you're giving it all of this data, you're helping to train the model for free for them, which is why they're giving the model away for free. Then they go to a paid model. So I think there's been a massive adoption for using the AI technology. But I think when you look at it from like a transactional standpoint, or you start to look at collecting data in a much quicker fashion, I think now that Google's using its AI overview section, I think that is bridging that gap. The unfortunate thing is the more that Google does with AI in the search results, they start to cannibalize some of their listings. So before you used to see 10 listings that were organic. You'd see paid ads on the top, the right. You'd see sometimes local listings within a map. Sometimes you see videos included and things of that nature. I think it's doing a better job of presenting all of the data quicker. But what is happening is a lot of those search results from like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th positions are not getting as much exposure. So very long-winded way of answering that question of, hey, it's not going to compete to the degree where we think Google is going to disappear. They have so much market share, and I'm happy to see other companies coming out and looking at providing data to people. What I like about AI, with Google specifically is companies like ChatGPT, they're keeping Google on their toes because you look at like VEO3, these different models for video. Like what Google keeps coming back in is they give free tools to
Yeah.
use that are getting better and better and better compared to companies that have paid tools. So I think it's really just going to keep them on their toes.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of people that are resisting AI. And I know that, like, with the amount of people in the world that are not using AI is staggering. What advice would you give to those people that do not want to adopt AI?
The biggest thing is you can't be afraid to try the technology. You're not going to break it, first off. One good example, I had a writer on my team, and she initially was fighting using AI. And I told her, hey, new tech, you're in a different generation. She's a generation above you and I. Very, very smart, very good old school writer. So it took about 2 months of this person going in and testing the technology. And after she got a handle of it, she came back to me and was like, holy crap, Brett, I'm glad that you were pushing me to test the tech because she's a really good writer, but now her output is like 2 to 3x. So anyone who's not using AI, what I tell them is you have to start using it because everyone's going to be using it. And it's not that it's going to take away your job. It's just going to make people like you and I who are using the tech to do things at a greater rate with much less friction. It's going to make us look better. And anybody who is on the fence, who doesn't want to use the AI, you got to get beyond that fear of learning new things. One of the things that I'm learning as I get older is I cannot be afraid of learning new things. If I do get afraid, people who are younger than me are going to pass me by because they're grabbing the bull by the horns and they're doing it. So I'd say take the risk. You can't break anything. And see how the AI can enhance one thing. I mentioned the example of using reports. I have team members who sometimes they can get a little frustrated with clients. So I have one team member on my team who I say, okay, what I'd like you to do is take your original response and run it through AI and tell chat to make it cleaner, make it nicer, make it friendlier. And then she'll send me back the email and I'll see it go out and I'll think, okay, I'm happy that she did because when I read her first response to the client, I was like, I would not send that. I would not do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What are some of the industries that you think is going to be impacted by AI, and how can those people work now to mitigate those issues that they might have if they do not adopt AI in the future?
I mean, I hear a lot more about like automation, with robotics and things of that nature. So a lot of people who are doing things manually where you're going out, like to look at Amazon, they have like 300,000 bots that are working in robots that are doing jobs that humans would do at, their data centers or their packing facilities. So you've got jobs like that where, yeah, the technology is going to be used at a greater degree, but, we still have drivers who are delivering packages. My guess is we're going to be having, maybe you might have drivers who are still in the trucks where the vehicles are being driven autonomously, but you have the drivers who can get out and deliver things much faster. So there will be changes in those kind of industries. The other thing is just any industry that uses anything related to content, in my opinion, if you're not creating good user-friendly content, whether it's text, whether it's video, whether it's audio, or it's geo-modified or local, businesses that are afraid to create content in that fashion, they're going to have issues because all of your competitors are doing that. But the problem I'm seeing right now is a lot of people are doing it, but they're creating noise. So the way that they will supersede their competitors is to create valuable content that is not just noise, that enhances what your competitors are doing. I tell AI, help me create something that's 20% better than what all of my competitors are doing right now with their content strategy. 10 to 20%, just that little tiny sliver will give you a major competitive difference.
Absolutely. This is awesome. What do you see right now is the biggest missed opportunity in using AI with content creation?
I think the biggest piece is just being able to conduct, people aren't doing as much competitive analysis as they could. To be able, like I mentioned with that massage therapist, to be able to go out and look at her top 10 competitors and have that much data in that quick, it was phenomenal. The only downside was that 40% of her competitors weren't listing their prices on their site. So now those people are missing out on an opportunity to reach more users because they have no data related to their prices because they're afraid of showing that information online. So the competitive component, I think, is huge. Being able to see, like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? And being able to come up with all those variations for it. One tool that I'll mention, if anybody wants to create content at scale, there's a tool called Koala Writer. It's one of my favorite for creating content at scale. So when we create content for link building, there's a lot of websites, they'll take content from you as long as you write about a given topic and they link back to our customers. Well, I have to create this content at scale. So I may use a tool like Koala Writer. I literally give the tool a keyword and I add branded phrases to it. So if you give the keyword, you're saying, massage therapist in Wesley Chapel, it's going to create a pretty good piece of content about it. But if you do massage therapist in Wesley Chapel by said brand, now the content that you're going to get from that tool is going to be completely related to the massage therapist, but it's going to be related to your customer. And you're going to create it at scale, or it could be with the word review or things of that nature. It's a very inexpensive tool, for like less than $200 a month. You literally have access to 200,000 or 300,000 words of content. I don't use that really heavily for client on-site work per se, but I do. If I got to go out to a person and give them 10 pieces of content about a customer, I'll go and use Koala Writer and have that 10 pieces of content written. And we're talking about 2,000 to 3,000 words each article with great structure. And it literally costs me like about $3 per run. And that content can rank and it's structurally sound.
Yeah. I know a lot of people might be wondering about this. How do you use AI for content multiplication?
So that's a really good question. One good example is you and I are having this conversation. There's video that's going to be created. Once that video is created, it's going to go to some place like YouTube. You can go and look up things like YouTube transcription services or whatever. There's a site, I think it's called YouTubetranscription.com. And you literally put in the URL of your YouTube video, and it gives you a transcription of what happened. What I'll do for people in some instances is I'll do an interview. I'll take everything from that interview and I'll run it into AI and say to Claude, hey, I need you to help create a bio on this person, or I need you to take this episode and turn this episode into a 10-part series on AI and SEO or content creation. And then the AI takes every bit of that messaging and it starts to create subsections. Now, when you take that content, you literally could take the video that you and I are having, chop this video into 10 pieces, 10 separate categories, and then now we have 10 pieces of content that can go on as blog post with your snippets of your video that are being referenced in that content to increase user engagement. You can also take those snippets with the audio. You can submit that content to podcast sites on the internet where you're now. So the key is really amplifying that brand. Now you have videos. So now you got one piece of video that gets to go to YouTube. It gets to go to TikTok. It gets to go to Instagram. You can put it on Blue Sky. You can put it on Twitter. You can put it on Facebook. You can put it on your Google Business Profile. So one video transcription can be chopped up into 10, 20 videos that can be chopped up into 10 to 20 pieces of content. I mentioned 5 or 6 different platforms. 10 pieces of content across 5 platforms. There's 50 submissions. And you created 50 different submissions from one video.
Yeah, and one thing that I also like to do that I don't see a lot of people doing from that. So from a whole talk show or podcast, you can ask AI, hey, pull out the best quotes that you can get from that show, and then now you can create graphic design with the quote of those people in there. So there's so much stuff that you can do that by repurposing that types of content. And 1 hour episode could literally create 2 to 3 months of content for you if you wanted to do it like that. So it's incredible.
Now, one strategy that I'll tell you that I use specifically related to that. I'll go in and I'll look at having something like Claude look at a particular category, and I'll say, hey, act as if you're interviewing somebody in this category. Come up with 30 phenomenal questions to showcase their experience to get a person to want to do business with that person. I get those 30 questions. I go in, I interview a client. We have a conversation that takes about 45 minutes. Now I ask them 30 questions. That gives me 30 separate reels that can be chopped up. I can now take those 30 reels and submit them to all of my social media accounts. We're going to be looking at things like what you guys can do, like with B-rolls, adding music, adding in the captions, making it look super professional. And then that content can literally, that one 45-minute conversation fueled a whole month's worth of content with just videos. And then those 30 pieces can then literally get turned into X number of pieces. Typically 30 questions can turn into about 150 pieces of content. So when you're talking about amplifying the brand, it's really easy. I think one thing that business owners and entrepreneurs are a little fearful of is how much time it takes to create it. But it could be as easy as having this kind of conversation where you're answering questions and somebody is taking that data and chopping it up and amplifying your brand all over the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see the future of AI, like people using HeyGen to create their videos, and also people that are actually coming to a studio or buying a camera and recording themselves to create content?
I think people are going to need to create content in a variety of methods. You know, you and I had an interview we spent 4 hours in the studio and we created 120 videos in 4 hours. That was a marathon. And it was fun being in the studio and just jamming. So I think there's going to be a combination of coming into a studio and doing this kind of conversation. You also could, when you're in the studio, is use some of that time to help create the perfect clone. I use some of our time to create a clone of myself. I thought, having great audio, great video. I created over 400 videos last year.
Wow.
From just our 4 hours on top of what you and I created. Another 400 videos.
That's incredible.
So I honestly believe people need to come in and do things like this where you can get higher end, you get the baseline to be able to create your avatar. You can use HeyGen for the video. You can use 11 Labs for the audio. You have a professional format like sitting here. Then you can amplify it by using AI and using those tools we just mentioned. And then that's going to give you a greater amount of reach and having a ton more content. So I think it's that, and it's also doing these kinds of interviews. Get on podcasts. Like you could have a conversation with somebody for 30 minutes, for an hour, and create 10 or 15 really good pieces of content. So my mindset is you have to be doing everything. I don't think the reason I would say that is if you create too much content that's just AI driven, it kind of doesn't appear like there's the human touch. One of my tips that I would make towards users is if you're going to create AI related content, what you want to do is have your face be very small on that video in a corner. So if you're creating a video that's like usually would be faceless and it's talking about AI revolution and why it's this, and this, and you've got me speaking about it, and you've got really good B-roll and really good music, and you see me in a very small corner, and you can see there's a person talking. You're not staring at that person's face. So the only way a person's gonna truly know that that's AI is if the person knows you really well. My wife teases me. She says that when I do AI, sometimes it sounds like the nasally Brett, and I'm like, what? It's because when I'm tweaking the audio, sometimes if I don't make my voice go a little faster and a little higher, it kind of sounds different. And I haven't had anybody else in those 400 videos say, man, your voice sounds really weird, Brett, except for my wife. She's like, it just doesn't sound, and I'm like, no, it doesn't have to sound 100%. But when you've got me in that corner speaking very small, nobody's eyes go straight down and they stare at the little talking head. Now, if you got me, this beautiful bald head, talking, and it's like massive, then you're going to be like, I think that's created with AI.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have as it relates to creating content with AI?
I think that it takes too long, that they just don't really know where to go. They don't know how to start. They don't know how to have that conversation with the AI. I think that's probably the biggest thing. You mentioned earlier fear. I do think one thing that really like to talk to you about that just popped into my head in relation to AI. Um, Rather than I know we've looked at content creation and digital marketing. One of the things that I've been studying a lot in the last 6 months, I'm not giving anybody financial advice. I'm just saying this is where my brain is going, and this is where I truly believe the industry is headed. So you've got companies like NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, who are purchasing all this land. They're building out all these data centers. They're consuming tremendous amount of electricity. So last month, I literally spent about 2 hours creating a strategy, and I was thinking to myself, okay, Brett, if you want to invest in AI, well, are you going to get into the rat race of like, do you invest heavily into NVIDIA? Do you invest into, like ChatGPT, Anthropic, Google? And I was kind of going crazy because I'm like, I don't want to have to try to pick and choose. So I started looking at like, where is the industry headed? So by 2030, the amount of energy we consume for AI is going to double. It's been growing by leaps and bounds. We already do not have the infrastructure to support AI. China is doing a phenomenal job of creating these micro nuclear power plants. And they've created like 30 or 40 just within the last like 2 years. Within the United States, I think we have 6 or 7. And out of those 6 or 7, only a few are operational. So where I see the industry heading is if a person wants to get ahead of where it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be power and infrastructure. So if we don't have enough power if we barely have enough now and we know it's going to double by 2030, our grid within the United States is 25 years old. So we need to have money invested into how energy transfers, electrification within the United States. There needs to be money invested into robotics. We need to look at nuclear, because nuclear power is one of the safest, and it gives you steady power. So I believe we're going to start seeing a lot of these smaller, I call them micro type power plants that are taking place with nuclear. The reason that they have to do that is they can get them up much faster, and they still provide a heavier amount of energy. So what I've been doing is I've been looking at like ETFs that are related to AI. I literally talked with Claude for about 2 hours last week and said, I need to create an ETF strategy that's related to what is going to power AI 10 years from now. And I said, I'm going to give you $100,000 in 2026. And I want you to help me figure out, I think it was like 7 different categories related to AI with the power, with robotics. You've got companies like Microsoft who are they're committing to billions of dollars. Amazon, billions of dollars for real estate related to housing all of this power. So you've got 6 or 7 categories that, in my opinion, are going to be massively impacted. And if I'm investing into what's powering AI, it needs power.
Yeah.
Why bet on one of the top 5 companies when you can bet on what's powering the AI?
Yeah. And AI is the future. If you're betting on that, you are definitely ahead of time. And not a lot of people are thinking the way that you are, which is awesome. Thank you for sharing that process, or that, like, how you're thinking about the future and all of that too. That's incredible. One thing that I know that you talk a lot about is reputation management. How do you use AI for good reputation management?
So every now and again, I will have people come to me and they say like, hey, something happened, and I have a conversation to figure out exactly what happened, because I know that there are bad things that happen to good entrepreneurs. I had a friend who his business, or he had a divorce, and it just didn't end well with his wife, and she said something, and it was like, at the end of the day, it was proven that he didn't do what she said he did. But there were instances on the internet that talked about allegedly. Now, when somebody goes and does a search for your name on Google, whether it's allegedly or not, depending on the data that's put out there, it can ruin your reputation. So with this particular doctor, I literally wound up going out and having AI scour the internet for all inferences about his name, with his doctor in front of it, without doctor, his area, We found every single instance on the internet that mentioned him in a negative fashion. We then went and created content because he didn't really have much online about himself. So I had an interview, talked with him, looked at all the other sources, and then wound up creating over 50 pieces of content that were similar in nature, that talked about who he was, what he did, with a slight variation of that content's theme. Then I have access to over 50 universities across the United States and some worldwide, where there are blogs that sit on like USC's website. So it's a subdomain where I can get a link to a client's website that mentions his name, and in the title tag, I mention his name, who he is, what he does. Anybody searching for this gentleman, Dr. Ken such and such, like they're going to see that content show up. So at the end of the day, the goal is, how do I create as much content about his name, where he's at, and get that content to rank super well? Well, EDU sites, in my opinion, it took me over a decade to learn how to get links on these websites. So now, like in his case, I created 50 posts that were similar in nature and got them sitting up on like Penn State's website, on their blog, that just mentioned who he is. And then within 3 months, took a while for that content. It used to be hard to get the links built. That was my biggest struggle. As soon as I went through that hurdle, my next struggle was getting the content found by Google. The absolute hardest thing on the planet Earth, to get an EDU link. You'd think it would be easy to get found. I have teams of people that just focus on doing this, and it takes 2 to 3 months to get Google to find it. But as soon as they do find it, what I notice is the content ranks really well on the college's site, but where you get strategic is by putting links to other website pages that rank on page 2 for that person's name. So now I've got 50 posts on all these college sites that have the chance of ranking really well, and those authoritative sites link to anything positive. Now when you do a search for this person, this doctor, the first negative instance is on page 3, the bottom of page 3.
Wow, that's incredible.
People may search that far, but they'll typically do 1 or 2 pages, and they're like, okay, Jet's a good guy. I'm not seeing anything show up under scam or negative review. But that's something that, for me, I look at it on a case-by-case basis, because I did work one time with a moving company, and I didn't work with them long, because what I noticed is I was creating a lot of really good content, but their Better Business Bureau reviews, like I was noticing that this company is getting 10 negative reviews a month. After 90 days, I said, guys, I don't want to work anymore on this project, because you're giving me a mountain to compete against. So what I noticed from a reputation standpoint is, if people created something and they're not vigilant, like by vigilant, I mean they could literally go to Reddit once a month and say, hey, I did a search for Jet's company and his name, and it used to rank, my Reddit post used to rank in the number 2 spot, and now it's on page 2. They might go in and have an updated post. Guess where that post goes? To page 1, rank number 2.
Wow.
So then I got to combat it again. So I always tell people, if you're willing to go the extra mile, if you have somebody who's vigilant, will you just create content and you just do a massive PR blast, online PRs. One other tool that I like to use is boosted blog posts. So not only can you do a press release, I'd say, hey, Jet's the greatest guy on earth. Here's what he's doing. He's impacting all these lives. That news post goes to 300 newspaper sites. Now, I use another tool called SEO Jet,
SEO Jet, let's go.
SEOjet.net, which you have the ability to do boosted blog posts. I literally can write a piece on you and do the same thing. So rather than have that piece of content show up on a college website, I go in and submit this blog post to a network of newspaper sites that state specifically that the content has been promoted. Now I just picked you up another 300 posts. Cost $99.
Wow.
$99.
If you take away one thing from this show, that was fire. That was bomb over here. I guess a follow-up question to this, what are some of your best strategies to help Google to pick up all of those content, so that way it can push everything else negative, down to page 3?
So the key thing really is instances of your name and your brand. So you can combat it really heavily. There's another great site, EIN News, EIN News Desk. They charge, same thing, $100 a press release, and you can get it syndicated to 300 to 400 places. People say news, it's not newsworthy, Jet. Wait a second. Did you land a new customer? Are you offering a new service in a new service area? Everything is relative to what you feel is news. To you, adding a new show. I just got a new room. We can enhance you, and it's more of a personal touch. That's news. You're not just creating it for the sake of creating it, but if it's from a reputation standpoint, yeah, you have to create something. So you might use a site like EIN News Desk to push out that content, and it costs you $100. You get 300 pickups. You follow it up with SEO Jet. You get another 300 pickups. Now you have 600 instances of your brand with links pointing to you. That's the first thing. The other thing is being able to figure out what are all the positives about. I've done things in the past where I've promoted somebody else's name. It's the same person I'm working with, but their name is also Jet or Mike Robinson or whatever their name is. And I noticed, man, this person's Twitter account is ranking really well for that name. I'm going to build links to that person's site. So there are things called Web 2.0 sites like blogger.com and things of that nature. I have access to over 2 million accounts that I own.
Wow.
And I have 10 pieces of software running on 10 separate servers every single month. So I can go back in and say, hey, I need to make sure that we just did 600 news, 300 PRs and 300 boosted blog posts. I can give those 600 URLs to my team and say, I need you to build 30,000 links. That doctor, I literally built 50 different blog posts. We did 600 URLs. So I had 650 URLs. I literally built out over 40,000 links to those assets. People may say, well, Black Hat. Okay, hold on. I'm not building out tens of thousands of links to that person's web page. Now, if you have a site that's a massive PR site or a big newspaper company picks up your story, if I build 1,000 links to that, Google's not going to get mad. Oh, it's a New York Post. They picked up your story and they just got an extra 1,000 links. So when I say like 30,000 links, I might literally build out 30,000 links spread across 600 URLs. So each URL may only be getting like 300 links, but you do it at scale, and then all of a sudden in time, I get excited when I start to see, I do a search for a client's name, and I'm like, man, that .gov site's been busting my rear end, and I'm like, I've been chewing on this site for like 2 months, and all of a sudden it hits 90 days, and then that listing starts dropping. I love seeing the positive because I already know my stuff is working, and in some cases, I've had to go, I did the 30,000, I boosted it to 40,000, 50,000. I wound up building 100,000 links to one of my hardest customers, but I truly believe that he was getting the raw end of the deal with the negative information. So I did a lot. I did 3 extra months of submissions. I didn't even charge him.
Wow.
Because I said, it's within my software. I already created the machine. I'm going to let the machine run for you for 3 extra months. That was $3,000 worth of value that I gave him simply because I didn't hit what I told him. I said, you know what? In 4 months, we should be here. I didn't get him there. So I gave him another $3,000 of services at no cost because I didn't hit my goal.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, not a lot of people would do that. They would be, okay, you already used all the money that you allotted for this. I'm done. Like, we're done.
Yep.
But you took the extra step to do that. That's incredible.
Yeah, I don't like not hitting my goals.
Yeah.
That's my kicker. If I say I'm going to do something and I don't, I tell my team, we're going to eat some crow.
Yeah.
Because we got to get it done.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you believe that people should stop doing as it relates to using AI in general?
Anything that you do, if you're not creating value, we talk about Google, we talk about all these other AI models. If you think of the end I kind of talk about it from the end in mind. So if you're always thinking about creating value for someone in some way, shape, or form, whether it's for yourself, for your customers, if you look at it from that standpoint and think, what's out there? How do I enhance it? I'm always providing value. Google from day one has said they want to give, in some way, shape, or form, they want to give users the best information in the shortest period of time and have the most credible information. So if you always think of that in mind, whether it's Google or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, whenever you're giving information that is the utmost importance and solves a problem, that's great, but also don't be afraid to make inferences to other sources. I've had to talk about competitors. You know, I have clients who say, Brett, I've got this bootstrap budget. I'm trying to do some social media stuff, and I got like $300 to spend a month. And I'm like, I'm not the one, because we're going to do some strategies that cost more money. But I know of another company. I'm going to make an introduction via text right now between you and the owner of that company. I'm giving them business. So I'm always thinking about giving value, if you do it with text, if you do it with audio, if you do it with video, if you're always thinking about creating content that adds value, you will not lose. Google will always glean on you because you become the authoritative person or the authority in your particular industry. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people kind of miss out on. They're afraid of AI. They look at all the tools and they're like, holy crap, there's so many tools. Then they choose one and then they butcher it because they create a bunch of stuff. They don't put a lot of thought into it and they don't think about what everybody else is doing and how to make it better. I think if you stand on those pillars, you will always get content right.
Awesome. It may be one, it may be two, it may be five, but what are your top tools that you are using that most people are not aware of that you're getting the most results from with AI?
I mean, we've talked about a variety of different tools that we use. About a year ago.
Yeah. I know you're the tool guys. That's why I'm asking you about that question
here's where I'm putting the difference.
Yeah.
When we were interacting at that other group, I focused on a lot of tools and I went very wide. Now I'm going very, very deep. So 25 for me was one of those years where instead of looking at every type of tool that I could use to add the most value to all these different areas, I said, no, I'm going to focus on HeyGen. I'm going to focus on 11 Labs. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT. I'm going to focus on Perplexity. I'm going to look at Claude. And I'm going to go extremely deep. So what I've done is spent tons and tons of time going very, very deep using like 4 or 5 different tools and saying, how do I get the most out of those? So now when people ask me, my answer back is like, if you stick to these 2 or 3 tools and you just use them right, you're gonna get every single thing that you need. I think people are kind of getting to that point right now where they just have so much options that they just don't know what to do. Like one good example that I didn't mention earlier, this is one of my favorite tools. There's a tool called Poppy AI, and what I like about this tool is unlike other AI tools, you literally have the ability to plug in multiple data points in a user face. So example, you can go in and take your video, your favorite YouTube video that you did. You can take your top 3 or 4 favorite videos of people who inspire you. Plug it all in. You can take your PDFs, you can take web pages, you can throw all this content in and you connect it through these diodes, these connectors. And you can cross-reference that and tell the AI, okay, Poppy, I want you to help look at how I speak, and I want you to create video scripts for me based on my top 3 people. Like if you love Jim Rohn or Tony Robbins or Earl Nightingale, all these old school players like I love, you're going to look at that, or like Napoleon Hill. You can say, can you help me create content that reflects my voice, my expertise, but as if that other person, like as if we were taking data directly from Earl Nightingale. And this tool will go out and create the same exact data. Then you take that data and you give it to something like HeyGen and say, hey, I need to start creating videos of myself. I cloned one of my clients back in the days with Poppy. We literally cloned. I pulled 120 of his videos, and I pulled like 800 videos of Bob Proctor, who was big in the space, the mind space. And I literally started creating content in this other person's voice as if it had been like swayed or influenced by Bob Proctor.
That's incredible. Yeah. I just kind of love all the deep, like you don't just go on the surface level with the AI, you go really deep with it and just kind of asking, even those questions that you're asking them is just kind of fantastic. Thank you for coming and sharing your expertise with everybody today. That has been such a wealth of knowledge, and kind of even like listening to you and kind of seeing how you think and how you operate and all the things that you were doing with AI is incredible. There are 5 questions that I typically like to ask everybody at the end of the talk show. We'll go through that, and if there are any other things that you wanted to chat before we close today too, happy to chat a little bit more about that. But the very first question that I have is, what is your $1 million advice for anybody watching this as it relates to digital marketing or anything like that?
My $1 million advice is be very aware of the rooms that you show up to. Be very aware of the people who you're interacting with. Make sure that you are finding ways of lifting yourself up, because I do believe that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. And in some cases, if you can't get a mentor who's in your area, go and find a mentor. I mentioned things like Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale, Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins. I literally I spend hours every day while I'm working. I love Earl Nightingale's voice. He would have been a great mentor. I love Jim Rohn. I love his voice. I would have loved, he mentored with Tony Robbins. These are old school people before that. So I tell people, make sure that you're getting a mentor to help you get to where you need to go twice. It's like AI. You have a mentor that is in your space that's 10 years ahead of you. They can tell you all the pitfalls of things that they ran through. It's like you get instant credibility, and it's like getting a degree from a college really, really fast. And to add on to that, make sure that when you listen to people's advice, make sure that the person is actually doing and they're where you want to be. Because everybody will give you advice on what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, and then you ask them, like, what have you done? And then they haven't done anything. So be very aware of who you listen to, what advice you take, and then take that information and focus, like really, really focus on just getting one thing done. I have one of my friends who I bust his chops, and you know him. I bust his chops all the time about like narrowing his focus, because he's got a lot of different companies. He does a lot of different things, and he's very, very smart. And I always tell him, like, hey, let's focus on 3 things we're going to do in 90 days, and let's just hammer them and get them knocked out. So I think it's easy to get in those rooms where people are not doing that, and they're not challenging you, and they're not elevating who you are. So if you can't find a mentor, there's so much content on YouTube. It's absolutely insane. I watch tens of hours every single week listening to things like, Earl Nightingale is my favorite, just because he's got that voice that is just, it's nostalgic. Mm-hmm. So I'd say even if you can't find it, go old school. Go to YouTube.
Love it. If you had to go back to day one to give yourself a piece of advice when you first started your career or first started your business, what would you tell your younger self?
I'd say buckle up, first off, because the ride is going to be crazy. You will see highs and lows. I think I talk about my faith and like where God has put me in life, and it's interesting because going through COVID, if I read the Bible and I listen to what Paul says about like making sure that when you're in highs and lows and being happy in both, I've truly learned to be very content with anything I want to get, practically, and also being extremely content with being at a point where, like I mentioned, you see 60% of your revenue disappear overnight, and you got to talk to your wife about why things have dried up because of COVID. So it's going to be a crazy journey. Hold on tight, stick your head down, focus, find a mentor, follow their direction, focus on one thing and make progress, even if it's making 1% progress every day, 1%. You start looking at that compounding. By the end of the year, you're up 300, 400, 500% on what you've done. I would tell myself, relentless pursuit of getting things done and just being as resilient as possible, because things are going to come your way, and you're going to have those days where you feel spectacular about being a business owner. And you're like, I'm doing, you're at the top of your game. And then you're going to have those moments where you're kicking yourself saying, why did I do this?
Yeah.
I have those conversations on a monthly basis.
Yeah. That was really well put. Thank you for sharing that. What is one resource or one book that has made the biggest impact on you and your business?
The one book is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. The reason I say that is there's so many things. He was a pioneer to Earl Nightingale, to Jim Rohn. He was literally like at the forefront, and he was looking at what made people successful. I have a copy, an old school copy at my house. I have my son read that every year. My son is 12. And I tell him, you don't have a job right now. You're a kid, you're in school. I tell him, I'm going to give you $100 bill when you finish this book. I need you to give me a synopsis of what it is you learned. And when you hear your 12-year-old talk about like perception and like, oh, if I have a positive mindset and things that I speak into existence, it makes my bald head literally tingle.
Yeah.
So that is that resource where it's like, if you can dig into it, you learn a lot about yourself. Wealth and becoming rich there's so many things. The new rich nowadays is having freedom. You don't have a boss who tells you where to go, what to do, when you can take your break, when you can go pee. You don't have that. You can do what you want when you want. I tell my son this. If you work for yourself, there's a lot more risks that come with it, but you have so much freedom. But like they say, that freedom, there's a lot of responsibility in terms of getting yourself to that freedom. So I have him read it every year, and I'm going to pay him his $100 when he reads it again, because his job is to learn that book and to start applying those principles. Because when you learn about how your mindset impacts every single thing that you've done, and you also realize that, oh crap, I feel like I'm living in hell right now. It's because of my decisions. It's because of my mindset. It's because of the things that I spoke into existence. Like today, this morning, I got up at 2 a.m. Did I want to? No. I woke up and was praying, God, why am I awake at 2 a.m.? I was pissed. So I usually drop my son off at school at about 8:20, and I go to the gym. And I had a moment where I was like, Brett, you're working out 5 days a week, bro. You would rather go and take a 2-hour nap before you speak with Jet today. I'm tired. I drove my sorry butt to the gym, and I did 15 sets of squats.
Wow.
And I was like, no, I look like a weakling doing those squats with low weights, but I was like, you're in it, you're going to do it. So I chose to go to the gym this morning rather than getting that 2-hour nap, which I needed because I got about 4 hours of sleep. But it's the discipline component.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was incredible. What is one thing that you wish that you started doing sooner?
I think the one thing that I wish I started doing sooner was doing a little bit more investing. I'm looking at my children right now, and I'm looking at like self-directed IRAs and things of that nature and investing. And I probably would have started doing more of that with my daughter 17 years ago, my son 13 years ago. That's probably the biggest thing, because I'm looking at things now generationally, and I'm going to be, this year I'm going to be doing a lot of catch up to be able to come up with those things. So like my goal is, okay, my daughter is going to be graduating next year. Got to come up with about 40 grand. I'm going to do that in the next 90 days to pay for her college. So it's like things like that where, hey, they have time. If I would have used time wiser 17 years ago, I wouldn't have to be putting myself through the ringer in the next 90 to 180 days to come up with that 40 grand, because it would have already been sitting in the account.
Yeah, for sure. The last time you came here, we did 120 videos here. And one of the topics that you talked about was around leadership. And I think you had like 20 plus topics already created for that specifically. What would you say is your top leadership lessons that you've learned that you could impart on the people watching this?
I would say with leadership, you have to be first and foremost true to yourself before you become a leader to others. And by that, I mean, you have to be willing to hold yourself accountable to get what you want. So I mentioned A and B players. If you allow yourself to lead a team of only B players, if that's all that you need, great. But if you're aspiring to have A player team members on your team getting things done, and you don't hold yourself to a certain level of accountability to have them be the role that they need to be, you're going to get a lower tier type of work. So a key thing there is making sure that you're reevaluating, like, what are you doing as a leader, and being able to make sure that you take responsibility, even sometimes when you don't have to. Like in my industry, sometimes things occur where I have to come to some of our clients and say, like, okay, there was an error that was made, and it wasn't made by me. It was made by a tech that I've got working on the project. So humbly, I say, hey, our team, maybe I didn't convey that to you correctly. I apologize. So you have to be very, very humble when you're working with the team members, and they got to be able to see when a team member sees you take an L for them, and then you're not chewing them out. You don't even have to chew them out, because they're like, oh crap, Jet just got chewed out by a customer for 15 minutes, and I sat on the phone and I was a fly on the wall. I didn't say anything, but he took it. Like, that was major. And I'm actually working with one of my ops people right now in teaching her about other things with leadership. And I'm showing her, like, hey, you have to sometimes get in it, but then at the same time, the other side of that coin is making sure that you also allow your team members to do what they need to do. Like, just last week, I had to tell that person, hey, you're doing a phenomenal job, but you are a bottleneck. And she was like, huh? I said, you are phenomenal at your job. You're type A squared. Really, really good. I said, but our business is not going to scale if you have to touch every deliverable. You have to be willing to give up the control of those deliverables and know that your team may do 90% of your 100%. That's okay. That's okay, because their 90% is still like 40% better than what our competitors are doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, calm down. You're in charge. Learn how to delegate the authority and learn how to give up that control and know that it may not be 100% of what you want, but it's going to be better than what our competitors are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the future? How does the future look like for you, or what do you? What is your legacy? What legacy do you want to leave with SEO outsourcing?
My legacy really is, I'm going to have my son. He's going to be running the company. He'll be the chief marketing officer, probably in the next 10 years. The reason I say that is I want to be able to be closer to my kids, and I know, hey, if he's working for me, he's going to be much closer. We're going to be able to interact. My daughter doesn't really want to do things in digital, that's great. She might be a nurse. Awesome. I'll have to incentivize her in other ways to keep her closer. I might have to buy her a house or something like, hey, stay near us in Tampa. So I think really the legacy there is just like being able to have that business that's continuing to thrive, even in the midst of all these changes, and then being able to see my son pick up that baton and move along with it. But the other thing really is just looking at customers, and then being able to have that mindset where the legacy of the business is the business thinks about customers first, strategy, solutions. And I tell our team members all the time, we had a meeting yesterday, and I said, guys, the thing that I'd like to see, even like my legacy for 26, is putting ourselves in the shoe of every single customer, even when the customer is acting like a jerk. Putting yourself in that person's shoes and saying, hey, you know what? I know why they're angry. It's not me. They're not mad at me. They're mad at a situation. And how do we best fit their needs? So a big piece there is just being able to make sure that we're leaving a legacy where we're showing customers, hey, you matter the most. We have to run a business, yes, but you have to be the front of our business. Just like when we would create any kind of content, how do you add value to Google? It's the same exact thing, adding value to customers.
Boom. Love it. What is your parting advice for anybody watching this?
Parting advice, said it earlier, make sure that you find a mentor. Make sure that you spend the time, and whether it's paying someone. I always tell younger people, find somebody who's doing what you want to do, pay them for their lunch. What you notice is most people, they don't even want you to do that. They think, oh, this kid's he or she is like 20 years old, and they're offering to take me out to lunch to just pick my brain. most of the cases they won't even let you pay for them because they want to pay for your lunch. But they feel like very thankful that you would even be willing to say, I'm willing to pay $100+ to just have a conversation with you for 1 hour. You know, you do that, you elevate, you don't have to pay stupid taxes. And by that I mean all the learning that you have to learn and all the mistakes that you have to make that come at a cost. You get to learn that really fast from somebody else. It's worth $100+. It's worth it every day of the week.
Absolutely. For anybody watching this and want to learn more about your business and how they can potentially work with you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can either get a hold of me at seooutsourcing.com, or we are almost finished revamping my personal site. It's drbrettlane.com. You can get in contact and either reach out via one of the forums or hit me up via phone.
Boom. There you have it. Brett, it's been such a pleasure. Dr. Lane, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, man. It's I know I've been wanting to have you come over and chop it up here. I'm so glad that we were able to make it happen today. So thank you for coming over and imparting your knowledge on, you know, our audience. And you shared so many great, valuable content, and I hope that we impact one person today.
Sounds awesome.
There you have it. Thanks for coming. There you have it. Thank you for tuning in. Let's go, baby. It's fire.